I grew up in rural Kentucky, but even way back then, the only people I knew who had chickens were my aunt and uncle who still lived on the Ray family farm. I never had to actually witness the process, but I knew that there was a one-to-one relationship between the chickens that were running around in the yard and what Aunt Maxine put on the dining room table for dinner. But it was virtually unheard of for most families who lived in neighborhoods to keep chickens. We got our eggs at the store, and our chicken either came in a KFC bucket, which for me, folks, Kentucky Fried Chicken is ethnic food. Or we got it at the Houchins Market on a little plastic tray covered in clear plastic wrap. But a few years ago, it became fashionable once again for folks to keep chickens in their backyard. Now, your friends will tell you about how great it is to have all those fresh eggs. But here's the thing about chickens. They will lay eggs for 1 or 2 years, maybe 3, but they will live for 8, 9, 10, 11 years. Now, my aunt and uncle never named their chickens. They did not hug their chickens. They did not get excited about collecting exotic chickens, nor did they sit around the living room endlessly telling their friends chicken stories. They had scrambled eggs at breakfast and fried chicken at dinner, and that was the extent of their relationship with chickens. My friends, however, name their chickens, their kids play with them, and after a couple of years, they find themselves running an eggless chicken nursing home. In fact, my friends, Paul and Josie, and I recently had dinner with someone who lives on a farm, and this woman casually mentioned cooking her non-laying hens. And Josie waited for this woman to go to the ladies' room for a moment, and Josie leaned over and suggested that we never hang out with this evil woman again. So you see, when I say, I love chicken, and when Josie says, I love my chickens, we are talking about two entirely different things. But it's not just farmers and butchers who have to maintain some critical objective distance from the objects of their profession. Have you ever known a surgeon very well? I mean, can you imagine being a surgeon? I can't. There was never a moment when I was even slightly tempted to apply to going to medical school. Even if I were trying to save someone's life, the very thought of putting a scalpel to someone's skin and cutting them, or what you did, Newt, with a circular saw, for God forbid, on a living human being. But there are people we need to have in society who don't hug their chickens, who are able to put enough distance between themselves and their patient to not stand over the patient who's getting a new knee, and you think of them as someone who likes to ride bicycles or to dance or to play tag with their grandchildren. At least during the surgery, you have to be able to suspend their humanity to do what you need to do. But you all don't want me to see you that way, do you? We don't want teachers to see their students that way. A normal person, not a saint, just a normal, decent person for whom basic empathy and compassion makes it possible for them to just keep a chicken that can't lay eggs, and you're not going to eat it, you just keep feeding it and giving it water. And let me tell you, it's not all that easy to form a relationship with a chicken. I have to take care of my friends' chickens from time to time, and those little pea-brained, skittery poopers don't have a lot of character to them, and yet, once you get to know them, it's pretty hard to think about eating them. So imagine my surprise a couple of weeks ago when I heard on the news that there was a school district in Pennsylvania that sent a letter to the parents of students who had unpaid bills from their school lunchroom. And the letter told them if they didn't pay their bills immediately, that they would be reported to the Division of Family Services and their children might be taken from them and put into foster care. Now, I know you want to think that I'm exaggerating. And I'll confess, say it's true, Bill, that if it were not for exaggeration, preachers wouldn't have much of a career. But folks, this is a hard, cold fact. There's the letter. This is a school system with an $80 million annual budget that had a total shortfall for the previous year in the lunchroom of $20,000. This gathering of teachers, administrators, were willing to threaten to take children from their parents and put them in foster care for this tiny, tiny fraction of their operating budget, 0.00025%, 1/4 of 1/1000th of a percent of their budget, and they were threatening to put children in foster care. Now, Joseph Muth is the school administrator who wrote the letter. He didn't seem to want to talk to the media, but I wanted to show you his picture just in case you happen to see him in an airport or at Silver Dollar City or anywhere in which you may, with your boot, convey to him my heartfelt contempt for him and his ilk. One school official in Pennsylvania did, however, quip, "Well, it worked." How does someone whose career is in education, in the care and nurture of children, come to see poor school children in about the same way that my uncle viewed the chickens in his front yard just before Sunday dinner? The ancient Judean prophet Amos rode his donkey up to preach among his wealthy relatives in the northern state of Israel. And he made fun of them, saying that they could just hardly wait for church to be over so that they could get back to making money, buying and selling, squeezing the margins, making the weight, the ephah for the wheat less, and then even sweeping the floor and putting the sweepings of the floor into the bag of wheat to get more money for their product. He says, "You buy the poor for silver and the needy for the cost of a pair of shoes." How does anybody get to that point? How does money become so important and people become little more than a commodity? One of the most memorable days of my seminary education was in a pastoral counseling course with the late Dr. Liston Mills. And he said to us that actually no one on earth can love more than 7 or 8 people at any one time. And generally speaking, he said, you're doing well if you really just care about 2 or 3 people. Now, I was a student pastor at that time. I had 70 or 80 church members. I was doing my clinicals and counseling in a mental health center. I was seeing 15 to 20 counseling clients every week. And I thought I was a good pastor. I thought as a good therapist that I needed to love all my clients and all my church members. How could I not? And I argued with Liston Mills vociferously. But Mills had a way of saying things as if they were unassailable facts. And that made me so mad I just couldn't hide my disdain for his hard, cynical take on human nature. But about 20 years after that class, I was sitting at my desk in a church here in Springfield, and I reflected back on that conversation and realized that I had not maintained contact with any of those people that I insisted that I loved so much, and that I couldn't remember the names of very many of them. So before he died, I wrote about a dozen letters to Liston Mills, on the one hand thanking him for being such a jerk in class, and he was, but also apologizing for what a difficult student I must have been. The point is that no one can love everyone. And it takes a real heroic spirit to be able to love 7 or 8 people at any one time. So it's easy for us to learn how to be dismissive of most of the people in the world. If we're not going to treat people like commodities, if we're going to resist using people to make a profit off of them, if we're not going to squeeze the humanity out of them to literally take their lunch money, then we have to make a conscious decision that we're just not going to go down that path. The handsome young, now former governor of Puerto Rico, Ricardo Rosselló, was forced to resign when someone leaked some of his private chats with leading advisors and aides, in which Rosselló had revealed himself to be a profane, vengeful, cruel individual who mocked his political opponents, often with misogynistic and homophobic slurs, and openly fantasized about choking the life out of the mayor of San Juan, Mrs. Cruz, and he heaped ridicule on the ordinary Puerto Ricans who were suffering after Hurricane Maria. He even made fun of the stacks of bodies outside of a morgue. Now, granted, Rosselló is a fan of President Trump, which is all the evidence you need to know that he's at least a court low on humanity. But this is what I have seen through the years from the fair-skinned descendants of Spaniards who run the governments in Central and South America and in the Caribbean when it comes to how they view their brown-skinned citizens. We can't love everyone. On a good day, we might only even be able to care about a few people. So we dismiss people for differences in race, politics, economic class, age, weight, sexual orientation. How could a young governor who had political aspirations literally make fun of the bodies of the poor that were stacked up outside the morgue in San Juan? How could a school administrator literally frighten parents and little kids with separation and foster care? Not even for illegally crossing the southern border, as obscene as that whole mess is, but literally, as the Prophet Amos said, for the price of a pair of shoes, $20 or $30 debt in the school lunchroom. But you know, being the governor of Puerto Rico got a lot harder after Hurricane Maria. So, is he to be allowed some gallows humor with your peers while working under all that pressure to administer the recovery of Puerto Rico? And managing a federal budget and all the special programs that MUF had to oversee in an $80 million operation. I've had to sit through meetings like that at Cox Hospital where you're looking at spreadsheets and you just get out your number 2 pencil and you start trying to look for the holes that you can fill. You can forget about who's on the other side of those programs, and humanity begins to evaporate. Though I sure do miss Barack Obama these days, I do remember that we lost some church members when I criticized his use of drones in Afghanistan and Iraq. They would send these robot planes to a village to blow up a house where a suspected terrorist was living, and the explosion would obviously kill family members that were in the house, sometimes kill some of the kids that were playing in the street in front of the house, sometimes kill some of the women that were hanging out laundry in the back. And I read that the military, in order to deal with these civilian casualties, redefined the targets so that anyone in the immediate vicinity was counted as an enemy combatant. So rather than killing civilians, they were killing enemy combatants. Just as many people dead, but if you redefine these children and these women building a fire to cook dinner or to hang out their laundry as combatants, then you're not a moral monster anymore. And in fact, you get to pat yourself on the back for being a brilliant military tactician. But even that inscrutable inhumanity pales in comparison to the way that #Machine Gun Mitch McConnell is slow walking a Senate response to the current cry for greater gun control. He is making noises about what the Senate will discuss, But he's doing it in that classic, insincere, slow way that he always does, assuming that the public will be horrified by last week's mass murders, but they'll only be horrified for a week or two, and then they'll forget. The same way we seem to forget about Sandy Hook, Aurora, Charleston, Orlando, Las Vegas, Stoneman Douglas High School, the Pittsburgh Synagogue. More than 500,000 Americans have died from guns since McConnell first went to the Senate, and he is as protective of the NRA as he was when he arrived in 1984. No one can love everyone. So to save energy, I gave up on trying to love Mitch McConnell a long time ago. Look, folks, a couple of months ago, to stop my doctor's incessant whining, I agreed to start lifting weights again. I have a full set of dumbbells on a rack in my home office that had just been sitting there gathering dust for the last 3 or 4 years. So I looked up on the internet a dumbbell workout for men of a certain age and set out to do the right thing. And 2 hours later, after I'd ingested several Advil, I drove up to the fitness shop to buy some lighter dumbbells. It was humiliating. It was humiliating. But I couldn't even lift the lightest weights that I was using from my previous fitness routine. I'm a walker, I'm a bike rider, but a month or so ago when I started lifting weights again, I'm not sure I could have bench pressed a can of corn. And love is like that. I'm serious about this. Love is like that. If we fail to exercise our sincere compassion and empathy for others, we will lose our ability to do it very well. I'm not saying that there's a Hitler or a Stalin or a Mussolini lurking about within us. We are not monsters. None of us would find any thrill in becoming more like Charles Manson. But I am saying that there is a natural drift towards indifference because we cannot love everyone. And because of that, there is a passive willingness to use people and to take the suffering of others for granted. There may be a Joseph Muth within us. Some of the rough, dismissive elitism of a Ricardo Rosselló or the cruel indifference of a Mitch McConnell may be within us if we do not choose to be concerned about those whom we do not know, but who do suffer. Okay, I need to dial that back a little bit because I am overselling this. I don't want any of you to lose sleep over this. There's not a creepy Moscow Mitch lurking inside of any of you, or in your closet or hiding under your bed. You may have to answer a riddle when you're crossing a footbridge someday, but don't worry, Mitch isn't very smart. At the Abbey of Gethsemane, the famous Trappist monastery in Kentucky where I go on retreat, there is a modern statue of a very intense-looking and forward-leaning statue of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. And there's a sash across his chest that reads in Latin, Amo ut amem, which translates, I love that I may love. I've stared at that statue for 30 years and have been embarrassed to ask anybody, what does that mean? What's the importance of that? But I think I've got it now. I think I see what Bernard was after. I love that I may learn how to love. I love so that I will get better at loving. I love those that are near to me so that I will be able to love those who are far away from me. I love those who are dear to me that one day I may be able to love those I now loathe. I know what my counseling professor meant We cannot muster the emotional energy to love everyone the way we might love a spouse, our children, or our one or two close friends. But we can refuse to forget that the children of the poor who cannot pay for their school lunch are also children who deserve to be loved. I may not be saint enough to sell everything I own and send the money to Hurricane Mitch victims in Puerto Rico, but I will not make light of their suffering, nor insulate myself from feeling the grief of those who unnecessarily lost loved ones. No one in my family, no one in my personal circle of friends were shot and killed at Columbine, in Aurora, Orlando, Las Vegas, Sandy Hook, Stoneman Douglas High School, or in El Paso or Dayton. But I do know this for sure, that if we allow ourselves to drift back into indifference, that somewhere between 30 and 40,000 more people will be shot and killed by this time next year. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Against the all-too-human tendency to withdraw, to insulate ourselves against the pain of the world by retreating into some cocoon of cynicism and anger, I am asking you to exercise your love, to stretch yourselves, to love more, so that you will remember the children who are now living in dog cages in detention centers along our border, and the children whose parents are at Walmart this weekend buying bulletproof backpacks for their kids to take to school this year, and the kids of parents who don't have lunch money to send with them. Amo ut amen.
Amen. Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.